I was never supposed to be a champion. Back in March, they called me a platform, a skeleton with potential, nothing more. Charles climbed into my cockpit and found a car that owned the corners but surrendered every straight. Then everything changed. Between Miami and Barcelona, every late night in Maranello turned potential into performance. 0.8 of a second later, I wasn't just faster. I had become the car everyone feared. And 300 kilometers away in Brackley, Mercedes stopped talking about ending development. They started talking about survival. This is how Ferrari turned the SF-26 from a promise into the biggest threat on the Formula One grid. Uncomfortable meetings behind closed doors. This is where the story starts to feel less like a technical update and more like a villain origin story. Ferrari, quietly assembling power in the background while everyone else was still watching the scoreboard from earlier in the season, still believing the SF-26 was the same base platform it had been in March. But 0.8 seconds was never the whole story. That number is just the visible surface of something bigger. The number everyone can point to, but not the number that explains everything. Underneath it sits a layer most fans never talk about, and it's arguably more important than the lap time itself, because lap time is a symptom. What's happening underneath is the cause. Start with the engine. In Austria, Ferrari introduced an upgrade to its internal combustion engine, the IC1, built around a revised combustion chamber, working in T. Rewind to early 2026, and the story of the SF-26 wasn't one anybody wanted to tell yet. This was a car still finding itself, quick through certain corners, but exposed the moment the track opened up. Ferrari's own technical director, Loic Serra, put it plainly at the time, describing the SF-26 as a base platform, a foundation, not a finished weapon. Those words weren't a throwaway line. They were a warning and a promise. A warning that the car wasn't there yet. A promise that it was designed to grow. Every engineer in Maranello understood the subtext. This wasn't about arriving fast. It was about building something that could keep getting faster, race after race, long after the paint had dried on launch day. And for the fans watching those early sessions, there was a very real, very human doubt in the air. Was this the year Ferrari finally closed the gap? Or was this just another false dawn wrapped in red bodywork? Ferrari had sold that promise before. A car with a strong foundation, a philosophy that would supposedly compound over a season, only to watch the gap plateau by summer. Skepticism wasn't cynicism here. It was pattern recognition, built from years of hope that didn't survive contact with July. So when Sarah used a word as unglamorous as platform, some heard humility. Others heard a team quietly preparing its own excuse in advance. Nobody, at that point, heard a threat. That doubt didn't last. What happened next wasn't one big leap. It was two coordinated strikes, delivered back-to-back, and together they changed everything. The first came in Miami. The second came in Barcelona. Individually, either package might have read as incremental, the kind of update that shaves a tenth here, cleans up airflow there. But stacked together, over the span of just a few race weekends, they represented something else entirely, a calculated, twin-pronged assault on the competition. Where the Miami package targeted low-speed rotation, sharpening the car's ability to change direction without bleeding time, the Barcelona update went after something harder to fix, high-speed stability, the kind of confidence a driver needs to commit fully through a corner rather than lift and hope. Separately, those are two normal updates. Together, they're a car being rebuilt from two different ends at once, converging on the same result. And the number that came out the other side of it was 0.8 seconds. To understand why that number matters, you have to understand what 0.8 seconds actually means in Formula One. This is a sport where the gap between pole position and 10th place on the grid is routinely less than 1 second. Read that again. An entire top 10 qualifying field, separated by less than a second of pace. So when a single team finds 0.8 seconds in the span of a few upgrades, that's not a fine-tuning exercise. That's a car being reborn. That's the kind of number that turns a midfield conversation into a championship conversation. It's the difference between starting fifth and starting on the front row. It's the difference between defending a position for 50 laps and simply driving away from it. And it's exactly the kind of number that, when it lands on a rival's data sheet, forces very tandem with Shell's fuel formula. On paper, that upgrade was worth somewhere in the region of 9 horsepower. Not a headline number. Not the kind of figure that makes a highlight reel. It's the kind of gain that, on its own, wouldn't earn a single second of broadcast commentary. But here's the twist. It barely showed up in Austria at all. The altitude and temperature at that circuit masked the gains, burying them under conditions that simply didn't let the upgrade breathe. Thinner air, a different cooling demand on the power unit. The exact environment where a combustion refinement struggles to prove itself. It looked, for one weekend, like a quiet update that hadn't done much of anything. Rivals barely noticed. Some may not have logged it at all. Then came Silverstone. Different air, different temperature. and suddenly the numbers that had been hiding in Austria exploded onto the timing screens. The horsepower was always there. It just needed the right conditions to show itself, and Silverstone gave it exactly that. Sea-level air, a track that rewards a power unit willing to give everything on the long straights. But the engine wasn't operating in isolation. Tied to that same power unit update was a software unlock, new energy deployment modes that let the team manage how and when that extra power hit the track. It's one thing to have more horsepower sitting in reserve. It's another to have the software intelligence to deploy it at precisely the right corner exit, on precisely the right lap, without burning through your energy budget too early and leaving the car defenseless on the final stint. And then there's the piece of this story that doesn't show up in any spec sheet at all: Charles Leclerc himself. From that Silverstone Friday onward, Leclerc began refining his own energy management on track, squeezing efficiency out of the car through sheer driving craft, not just engineering. That's a skill that doesn't get a component number, doesn't get weighed on a scale in the factory, and doesn't show up in a press release about new parts. It's judgment, built lap by lap, session by session, the kind of thing only a driver who has spent years inside a single car's limitations can develop. And crucially, that refinement didn't stay a one-race trick. It became a habit, something he's now carrying into every remaining round of the season. A car is only ever half the equation. The other half is the person extracting everything it has to give. And Leclerc quietly became a performance upgrade in his own right, one that doesn't require a single new carbon fiber part. Stack all of that up: the aero from Miami and Barcelona, the disguised engine gain from Austria, the software unlock that came with it, and Leclerc's own refinement behind the wheel, and the picture that emerges is bigger than 0.8 seconds. That number was just what showed up on a stopwatch on one particular weekend. The real gap Ferrari built is layered, compounding, and this is the part that should worry every rival on the grid, still growing. Which brings us to Brackley, and the reckoning. Nobody there wanted to have this early. The plan, reportedly, had been simple: shut down active development on the W17 shortly after the summer break, redirect every resource toward 2027, and let this season play out on cruise control while the next car took shape behind closed doors. It's a strategy plenty of teams have used before. Cut your losses on a car that's plateaued and pour everything into the next regulation cycle, betting that a fresh set of rules is a better use of a finite budget cap than squeezing another tenth out of an aging platform. For Mercedes, heading into the summer, that looked like the sensible move. Rational, disciplined, exactly the kind of decision a well-run operation makes when it trusts its own long-term process more than a short-term scoreboard. Except that plan is reportedly gone now. In its place, a second major upgrade package, rushed forward instead of shelved. That's not the move of a team playing out the string. That's the move of a team that looked at Ferrari's numbers, ran the projection forward to the final races of the season, and decided it couldn't afford to stand still. Reallocating resources this late in a season isn't free. It means pulling engineers off next year's car. It means wind tunnel time that was earmarked for 2027 getting redirected back to a chassis that was supposed to already be finished evolving. That's not a minor adjustment. That's a team quietly admitting its own timeline was wrong. And suddenly, Toto Wolff's public comments about Ferrari's pace read differently. What might have sounded, on the surface, like simple respect for a rival, a team principal tipping his cap to good engineering, the kind of generous quote teams give each other in press conferences without meaning much by it, starts to look like something else entirely: a tell. A small crack in the composure of a team that has spent years being the one everyone else has to catch, the one setting the pace rather than chasing it. Because that's the real story buried underneath all the technical detail here. This isn't just about aero packages or horsepower figures anymore. It's about the moment the hunter realizes, maybe for the first time all season, that it's the one being hunted, and about whether a plan built for 2027 can survive an opponent that refuses to wait that long.